to each one of the panelists, thanks a lot for accepting, for doing this. I'm going to get right to the crux. I'm going to start with you, Mike. I've got to ask you this. Winning the World Championship of Public Speaking, right? It would have meant a lot. What was the first thing you did? How did it feel? What went through? What were the emotions that you went through as soon as you won the World Championship? And while you're going to answer that, I have a small video for you. And guys, you'll see me refer to Ashish, who's the Zoom master. So Ashish, can you please play the video for us?
Did I see it correctly?
What? You're the best in the world!
I think, did I see it correctly?
Mike, walk us through this. What's happening?
Oh, right in that video. Okay, so at first I have to double check. Can you hear me okay? Because my mic failed at my last event 12 hours ago. So just had to double check. But yes, at that moment, I had watched the speech with some speaker friends of mine on an outdoor venue. They had a patio and they had a little television set up. I had to run back to the house because the Toastmasters had said, okay, all the finalists, we want you to be ready for whatever the result and if whoever is going to go on camera. So I was back in my master bath getting dressed, continuing to refresh the screen on my phone, trying to see, well, okay, did I even place? Did I embarrass myself? What happened? And then all of a sudden, that daughter heard me say from the master bath, say, "Oh man!" And in my house, when they hear me say something like, "Oh man," that means that I may have cut off my arm. That means I may have won the lottery. That may mean I just dropped a grape on the floor and I really wanted to eat that grape. And so they all came around and said, "What?" And I came around the corner. You can see that little corner there. I'm looking at my phone. I came around the corner and I literally had this look on my face and I said, "I won." And that's when the video started. And Journey, that's one of my daughters, was jumping up and down and making a big deal out of it. But I was still saying, did I see that right? I'm not sure, because it's not in front of a whole big group.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that jumped right off the video for me was the shock on your face and the joy on her face. I mean, there was such a contrast. There were so many emotions that were happening. And I think that's possibly the best way to describe something like this. I guess people would always want to know, how does it feel to win the World Championship? But there's no real way to describe it. You just got to feel it. And that's why I want to see how it was. And it kind of brings me back, like, you've been here 25 years competing, trying to be the world champion, trying to better yourself at every step of the way. And this, I think, and I will open this up to the whole panel right now, is all of us compete, all of you compete for a reason to get better. The reason you keep going back to the stage is to improve continuously. The World Championship could be the side effect of what happens. But my question would be, what is something that you have learned on the World Championship stage that you've possibly taken back to the club, or something that you've learned along the way? If you could just share that, anybody from the panel.
I just talked, so I'll let somebody else go first.
I'm going to go first, but before I do that, I want to change my background. So I can congratulate this man once again. Congratulations, Mike. We haven't spoken before, and you're truly one of the humble champions I've met, who did not even make a post on social media about winning this thing. So I wanted to put this background to honor you. First of all, congratulations, phenomenal speech, and what a way of using this virtual way and showing us how it's done. And this is a good example of what I take from this whole pursuit of this world championship is it's the growth mindset. Every time you pursue this, every time you land somewhere, you might have a heartbreak if you lose, But very sudden, when you go back to your club, you don't want to give it up because you have been infected with this growth mindset. You just want to get better. So I think that's definitely been the only thing I can think of since the last 6 years since I joined Toastmasters and got in this contest is the growth mindset. That's what keeps me going.
Thank you. Kaishika, you want to chime in? You might
sorry. Please unmute yourself, Kaishika. Yeah, thank you.
See, this is the thing with virtual stuff. I forget to unmute myself. So I was saying, good to see you, Bharat. And congratulations to Mike. I can see why you are the champion.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. You are very animated and you've got some great sense of humor, and I really admire Pranab's question, which was to learn something from everyone. Because coming from an Asian context, the sole thing that you have in your mind is to somehow try and win a title or place or, do something big for yourself. But when you go to an international stage, the first thing that you feel is everybody's so welcoming and nobody really cares whether you win or not. And the most important thing that I learned from everyone is that everyone wants to just have fun and learn something from everyone. And that's probably the most important thing that I learned. And that's one thing that I always tell everyone about my experiences as well.
Right. Thanks. Just a small note. I think, Kaish, you did mention you were underground in the dungeons of Sri Lanka somewhere. So we are going to face a little issues with regards to the audio, but it's better than nothing. So guys, please bear with us, but we will make it through this alive. Aditya, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Pranab. And hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. Congrats again, officially, Mike. We haven't spoken in person after your championship. Wonderful. I can see it's a similar background to where you delivered your world. It's probably the lucky corner in your house now. So it's lovely to be here in District 92. One of my friends said, Aditya, isn't this the 4th or 5th time you're speaking to District 92, the lockdown? I said, yes. And he said, which means you still haven't been able to land your message to them. You got to go back again and again and say the same thing. But to me, the world champ, in 2014, 15, and 17, those 3 occasions taught me how easier it becomes each time when you've experienced something before. In 2014, the jitters I had, the butterflies, the proverbial butterflies, seemed to vanish in 2017. So it just taught me that if you keep at it, there will be a time when it becomes easier. And at that point in time, you're able to deliver what matters rather than think about yourself and be more self-conscious. So I bring that back to the club, to my life every single time.
Right. Thanks. So Aditya, just based on that, with regards to being able to handle your jitters a little better, again, this is up for the whole panel. The question I think all of us want to know is, how do you handle nerves per se? I mean, nobody ever really gets rid of nerves completely, but is there a technique? Is there something that you do to handle them better? And also understand, apart from just being nervous to deliver a good speech, being a world championship, when people looking up to you, there is the burden of expectations of people, right? You want to deliver well. And to a small extent, to a very small degree, I think a lot of senior members in Toastmasters feel this as well. You start off with wanting to be better version of yourself, but then we start making speeches and everybody expects more from you on a stage. So somewhere the experimentation stops because they're afraid to fail. I think people can learn a lot from what you do personally in order to how you deal with those expectations. So how do you handle those nerves? So again, up to the panel.
All right. So since I finished, I can start and then allow the others to continue. I just remember, I liked saying anecdotes instead of lessons. So let me go back to 2014. Here I was a night before the semifinals, my first semifinals of the World Championship in Kuala Lumpur. And then I was messaging my friend Dhananjaya Hetirachi, who ended up winning the competition that year. That was his 4th semifinal straight. So 2011, 12, 13, 14. So who better to message the previous night than Dhananjaya? I said, Dhananjaya, oh my goodness, I feel the jitters. what's your expert advice? He said something very interesting that stuck with me after that, even till today. He said, Aditya, I feel nervous too. You know, Aditya, I've learned that don't do this for anybody. You don't do this for your club, don't do this for your district, don't do this for your friends, don't do this for your family. Of course, they love you and you love them, but you are doing this for yourself at the end of the day. Not in a selfish way, but don't have the pressure of making someone else proud of you at this moment. You and your message are alone. Go deliver it to your audience. That takes the pressure away. So that really helps me. I don't think about my district, my family, my friends. I just think about me and my audience, and that helps me take those jitters away.
Just before someone could answer that, I want to tell the audience, I think that was a great answer. So remember, that's great, that's new, and that's funny. If that's something great, please do share it. I'm sorry to cut the panelists off. Maybe if somebody can take that, how do you handle nerves?
I was just being quiet because there's a kid in the background screaming. But, as long as you can handle that, I'll give you the answer. Cool. It's a great one, what Aditya just mentioned there. And before I start my answer, now I want to say hello to everyone who's joined from District 92 and all over the world, even from District 73, my own district in Australia, and also from Los Angeles, I believe, where it's my new club. And with that, thank you to these people. I must mention this, that it's amazing how the nervousness is so related to the environment you're speaking in. And what was phenomenal about Toastmasters is when I joined and I got straight in the contest after doing my first 6 speeches and becoming a club president, is such a supportive environment, such a supportive bunch of people. Every time I've been somewhere on some stage, there have been people supporting and, helping you out and giving you tips, including when I first landed in Vegas to give. I had people from Los Angeles, where I was practicing, coming to support me, right? So that, I would say, is a big contributor to the nerves taken care of. And the second important thing which comes to mind, like someone told Aditya about, why you do this. One of the earliest things I was told when I started competing, and I think I was in area and I was getting a bit nervous, was that one message of, nervousness only comes from when you're focused on yourself, how you look, how you sound. Those days I was a bit conscious about, I am speaking in Australia to an Australian crowd. Am I well understood? I used to speak really fast. And I think one of my mentors, I had 2 mentors in my club. One of them just said, your job is to focus on the audience. If you're completely focused on them and trying to make them laugh, make them think, make them feel whatever, you're not thinking about yourself, and your nervousness will go away. And trust me, that's the biggest thing I've learned, that if you are creating your content for the audience and you're focusing on engaging them, you don't feel as nervous.
Thanks. That's an important thing that you spoke about with regards to the audience, and we will expand on that in a little bit as well. Kaishika, Mike, do you want to fill in the gaps here, or whatever works for you personally?
Yeah. So I'll take it from there. The first thing that I learned from my mentors, from my club presidents, to everyone who supported me, is that they had different perspective. You're going there, you have a message to tell, you have an audience, and all of that. But all of that just kept making me nervous. When you know that there's an audience and people who are expecting so much from you, you always think low of yourself. Like, what if I'm not up to the expectations? What if I don't reach that pinnacle of expectations? And that just made me so nervous. And at one point, there was this one friend of mine said, this actually might relate to a lot of them. She said, when Shah Rukh Khan goes on stage, he's not worried about anyone. It's just Shah Rukh Khan. He just goes up on stage, he performs, people just go, oh, that is so great. And she said, maybe that's going to help you. And that was so true. She said, you have 7 minutes of fun and fame. Just go, be yourself. You have a story to tell. You've done this before. You've seen yourself on the mirror. It's okay. There's just 2,000 people with 4,000 eyes. That's okay. Just go, be yourself, say your message, and walk down like a diva. And that's exactly what makes the jitters go away. You're just going there, just have fun, just for that moment. But before that, yes, you have an audience, a message, and you have to think about all of that. But for those 7 minutes, just go there and be a diva, and you'll be fine.
I think the recurring theme is it's all about the mindset here. So great points. Thanks. The champ, Mike.
Yeah, I would say there are three things, but it's certainly an internal battle. The first thing is it is a great discipline to be able to work on that mindset that I want to quiet the opinion. And I think this is true for all of us in every area of our lives. Quiet others' opinions inside our head. Robert Kiyosaki, in one of his books, had this great quote where he said, "I believe that success in life is directly proportional to one's immunity to ridicule and rejection." And I firmly believe that. My life experiences has taught me that. And so this was a great discipline to quiet the opinions and the expectations in my mind. So I think it's a great reason just to join the contest at all. The second thing was the idea that years ago, I was all about the trophy. I was all about hitting some goal, and the disappointment and the discouragement wore me down over time. And when I finally gave that up and the contest became about making a speech the very best it could be, then it became joyful, and we tried things, and it was a joyful journey. So that was the second thing, making it about making the speech the very best thing. And then finally, just the third thing, is giving gifts out to the world. That if we believe that there's someone in our audience every time that needs this message that the Creator has placed in us to be able to give to just that one person, then it's just delivering what, the beautiful piece of art that we've been given. And if somebody else over on the other side of the auditorium says, "Oh, that was awful," or "I thought that wasn't as good as your last one," really doesn't matter. It wasn't for them. It was for the person it was for.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for that. One thing I noticed, I think all of us did speak about the audience, right? Be audience centric. And whether it's you're speaking to one particular person or the whole group. And Mike, just to expand on this, I always say, like you rightly said, we don't need to please everybody. And we go in with that assumption, right? If you're 100 people in the audience, just assume 30 people will hate you for no reason, and the other 30 won't care, right? So you want to speak to the people to whom it really matters. So my question here is, how do you speak to the audience? Like, how do you know what works, what doesn't work? What is your process? I would like to ask this. I would again open for the whole panel, but I would like to start with Bharat here, because I remember you mentioned something about it. You said the ABC of speaking. Be authentic, the brevity and clarity of speech, so you can connect with the audience. Maybe if you could just expand on that, and the other panelists can chime in as well.
So I suppose the question is, how do you speak to the audience? How do you connect to the audience, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's I'm sorry. So most importantly, how do you speak to the audience? But how do you know your messages will connect with the audience? How do you kind of refine that?
That's a great question. And I think from memory, when I first started writing speeches, as opposed to just coming up, standing and speaking, it all came down to how much can you simplify things? How much can you simplify things that people can follow? And once you start speaking more and more and more, and you start moving away from the mechanics of having to say a simple catchphrase or a line that you want to repeat so people will remember, you start realizing that you got to go and say a speech as you think you should, as the way you feel, as the way you normally have this stream of consciousness as you write, whatever your way is, right? And then just go and deliver in the club and see how many people come and talk to you after that. See how many people come and tell you that they liked it, they connected with it, they understand it, that's really spoke to me because it happened to me, and those kind of things, right? And I started realizing if my speech goes in that path from club to area, then I'm onto something. Then I have to work only on making this more simpler, and so I don't go over time and whatnot. So my process is really about going and saying something that I truly feel about, or the way I want to say it, and see if it connects with people, and then focus on the messages later. So I literally just wait for feedback that comes to me without asking for feedback.
right? The kind of foundation that Toastmasters was built on, right? So kind of leveraging the whole system. Perfect. What about the others? How do you go about the whole process?
Oh, hey, listen, for me, I believe that in order for me to know whether a speech is going to connect or create impact, I ask myself, does it really impact me, first of all? I am my first audience. If I don't feel energetic to go back to the script, modify it, refine it, practice it, if I feel it as a chore instead of something passionate about, I realize it can't go too far because I am not passionate about it. So I've experienced speeches where I am so excited about the speech that I would want to talk about that subject. I would want to think about that subject, not just this 5 to 7 minute speech about the topic, the theme underlying it. When I'm in the shower, when I'm walking, when I'm driving to work, because that's a theme, that's a topic I'm passionate about. And a spillover of that passion is what that reaches the audience. You cannot rely on audience connect when you're not connected to your speech. So when people do ask me sometimes, Aditya, how do I connect? Do I kill a relative in my speech that will add sympathy from the audience to me? I'm saying, but you may not really empathize with that situation yourself because it didn't really happen. So my yardstick for connect is whether that impacts me first. And now, since most of us in this panel have been doing this for a long time, you develop an instinct that the moment it impacts you, there is a great probability that it will impact the audience.
That's a good point.
Yeah, something you really mentioned as well. I mean, a lot of people get stuck on, do I need to kill somebody? I think one of the Toastmasters jokingly mentioned your speech needs to have the DDS, dead, dying, or sick. One of those people need to be in your speech for some reason for it to connect. But it's good that you want to speak actually to make an impact and not really rely on relatives to take the speech ahead. So Mike, you were saying.
I have a question for, sorry, Aditya, you're right here in my screen, so that's why I kind of look that way. So have you actually killed someone in a speech? One of your relatives?
Well, I tried to, but they were alive in real life after that.
So you killed them and brought them back to life? That's pretty amazing.
It's like young kids in school when they miss school and the teacher asks, why did you miss school? They said, my grandfather died. And 2 days later, my other grandfather died. But 4 days later, the first grandfather died again. So sometimes we go. So there is this fundamental void in people which makes them believe that, am I really worthy enough to stand on a big stage and deliver a message that will change lives? Because there's nothing special that has happened in my life. I haven't traveled the world. I haven't met failure. I haven't lost a loved one. What do I know about connecting to the audience? And that's where they resort to measures where they need to be dramatic in order to create impact. But the truth is, connect does not require intensity. It requires incidents that the audience have felt and experienced in their lives too. And that's why I take killing as an extreme example. But what DDS Pranab said is, we don't need to use those examples alone to win contests. Any simple incident can win contests. Like your speech, Mike, it was an example of a student with two kinds of teachers, which all of us have experienced. So we were able to connect with it. So that's what I meant.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And I think this speaks to, somebody else mentioned the global nature of Toastmasters and this contest as it's becoming. I mean, my goodness, you started in Australia and then now in LA. And I think that's so wonderful that at the base of those stories, all of the emotions there are universal. We have most likely, if we've lived in a number of years, lost someone and felt the pain of that loss. And so although, your story might be different than my story, those universal, tapping into those universal emotions that are all across the world, then can really create that depth of connection. Going back to your question about how do I know, I think that's a really great point. Those of us who've done this for a while, you kind of begin to get a sense of what is going to touch an audience. But goodness, 6 months ago, I tried a speech in the club and it fell flat. And I think that we've just got to get outside of our own heads, recognize that 100 years from now, no one is going to care who I am, and go out and try some things. If I think this is going to resonate, try it. That's what's great about Toastmasters. Come in and try it in a club. And a lot of times you can see in the eyes of the audience, or you have some really good friends who come up to you afterward and say, you missed it on that one. And that's really great feedback. Or they come up with tears in their eyes and they call you or they text you and they say, that really spoke to me.
Can I jump in with another thing, Pranab?
Yeah, sure.
Since this is a panel discussion, and I think one of the things we discussed was we want to make sure that people listening get the maximum value and all the experience that we have that we can share, right? And there was this one thing that we mentioned about death, dying, and sickness, which you brought up. And so I definitely want to touch about it because I've thought about this a lot. And because that was a massive conundrum in my mind, a massive, massive conflict when I was going with a speech with death in the 2019 speech. And I discussed, I researched, and I realized this whole thing about death, dying, and syndrome is about don't use these topics because these are beaten to death. That is one way of trying to, do emotional manipulation to the judges and the audiences, and that's how you want to connect. So don't do it deliberately. But when I thought about it and when I discussed with a lot of people, including some world champions, on why is it emotional manipulation if it's a true story? And the answer was, no, it's not. If it's integral part of your story, if that's a story, like Aditya said, has left a big impact on you, please don't let it stop you from not using it. Please use it. To me, the whole story about my father-in-law passing away and we not able to donate his organs, although he would have if he could have made a choice, but we could not make that choice, was very, very important message for me that we just could not deliver his organs. And that changed me as a person. I signed up for organ donation straight away. That was a whole central theme of my thing, a missed opportunity, right? So I could not have done that speech without telling the story of how my father-in-law dying and missed opportunity. Same with Mike's semi-final speech on Blue. Phenomenal speech once again, right? It was about a feeling of regret about losing his friend, but it was also about be like that person. Create the beauty moments in other people's life, like his girlfriend did in the childhood, right? So if it's important message, please do it. Don't let death, dying, and sickness be these taboo subjects, but make sure they have left an impact on you, and that's why you're speaking on it.
Brilliant. So I'm going to touch upon two things you did mention here. One thing, when you spoke about organ donation, I have seen your Facebook post. I think you voluntarily go and donate a lot of blood. So like Aditya was saying, you need to live that lifestyle, not just say it in the 5 to 7 minutes, but stay it. And I've seen that as well. And the same thing when you were talking about Mike in the speech Blue, and he spoke about Maria and how she turns up the volume on experience. And I've noticed Mike doing that with his family, living his life, like going on treks, going hiking, doing everything that can turn up the volume on experience. So I think the underlying theme is for us to live our speech rather than just say the script out loud. And kind of continue on this, Kaishika, do you have something to expand on how to make a connect with the audience? When we spoke, I think you did mention write a speech that it's not for the win, but in order to connect with the audience, focus on the content. Could you just expand on that?
So this actually comes as so many requests from Toastmasters who say, I don't have a great story. I've never failed an exam. I've never been dumped once in my life, or there's never a death in my family. We're all healthy. So everyone thinks that something negative needs to be there in the story. Not really. It's if you have a good set of friends, work colleagues, and if you constantly interact with them, you would know what connects with people in general. So Toastmasters are people who are not different from that. We are all people who have normal lives. Not often, not every day and week do we have a huge failure hitting us. It may be just once or twice, but it creates this very huge like void in us that makes us connect to these stories. I remember one time when somebody said, don't kill a person, or don't, the DDS syndrome, don't use it. It might fall flat. People might think you're faking it. So I didn't try it in Toastmasters, but I was supposed to give a speech this year for Women's Day. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to forget about this. I'm going to tell a story that really connects with me. So I lost my dad in 2013 to liver cancer, which is hepatocellular carcinoma. So I was telling the story about how my father did not see me as a female child, but rather saw me as a child, and always gave me the freedom and the education that I deserved. And while I was saying this, I recognized so many eyes tearing up, and I had to break the news that this great character that I've been explaining is no more with me. And that empty chair that he used to sit and read his newspaper, the place where he leaves his plate and his cutlery, his clothes, all of this reminds me of him. And the moment I said that, I had a room full of ladies just weeping and taking out tissues and wiping their faces, and I was crying. So that's when I realized, if it's an experience that you've actually been through, you cannot present it to an audience in a Toastmaster way. You cry, you take a break, you drink a lot of water, you say a word, then you stop, you mute yourself, you look at the ceiling, you disconnect yourself from the audience, because looking at people makes you cry. So that's where I agree with Bharat, Mike, and Aditya, is that if it's a true story, you won't be able to say it, because the emotions around it is so much more deeper and painful that you can't. It's not about the trophy that's on that table. It's about a person you used to love so much who has passed away, and that is so much different and difficult than performing in front of an audience. And that's when I realized, well, yes, this is why they say you don't kill a person in one of your speeches, because if you do, if it's true, you won't be able to continue the speech, and if it's not, people will recognize it. So it's about that authentic feeling of where you're coming from. Where's your speech coming from? If you can't do it the sad way to connect with people, do it the fun way. I mean, look at us. We're all like, you look at our faces, you want to laugh. And that's a great way to connect with people. You don't necessarily have to kill people. You can make them laugh too.
That's beautiful.
Yes, that is so well said. I love that. Every bit.
I'm going to honor your background now.
Mike, you already won the trophy. You don't need to do this now again.
Just cancel everything I'm going to say from now on and just play that again.
So Pranab, can I make a quick point?
Yeah,
so what
absolutely.
Kaishika said. So I think it all depends on how we learn public speaking, isn't it? We are so used to learning by what I call deconstruct and reconstruct, that many people hearing Kaishika now may think, all right, so she said to be authentic, we got to look at the ceiling. So Kaishika, in a minute, how many times should I look at the ceiling? That becomes a process now. so that is something that comes at the moment because of your emotion, to trying to deconstruct Kaishika's emotion, because she's a great speaker, and reconstruct that in me, saying, all right, 6 times in 5 minutes, I need to look at the ceiling, then that's emotional. Or I need to have a joke every 25 seconds because the past world champions had that. The moment we use reductionism, like a scientific laboratory, to deconstruct and reconstruct a speech, the original person's emotion is replaced now by a process. Now you got to find out what's your natural emotion, which another person may try to deconstruct later. But authenticity means you just cannot observe another person and reconstruct everything in you and expect to have the same results.
Oh, dude, that is so good.
Try and recreate Kaishika's emotion on my background.
This looks like one of those marriage cards.
Which one, sorry?
So you in India, you get some of this frugal, cheap weddings. You get this photoshopped version of marriage cards with a girl or a guy photoshopped.
For me, it looks like Kaishika looking at Bharat's room and saying, "Keep it tidier, mate."
Gee, thanks, guys.
So we now know she was looking at the ceiling and at the walls as well. So guys, this was something beautiful. What I think, Mike, you did mention this a long time back in one of your addresses as well, is to be authentic, crack yourself open, be vulnerable, but do not turn it into a group therapy. Don't go there, pour your heart out and let people see the most vulnerable and start crying and turn it into a therapy session. You don't want that, right? You want to inspire people so that they feel from the pain and they get the power to move on, not you, right? And that's the fine line. And Aditya, you did bring up a point about the process, the mechanics of the speech, and somebody saying, how many times do I need to look at the ceiling? And while we were floating this panel, we got a bunch of questions as well. People were asking, how many times do you practice your speech? And in my head, I'm not going to ask that question because each person has a different way. What works for one person might not work for another person. Each person practices a different way. So let's not focus a lot on how many times or what happens, like put a number to things, but let us kind of see if we can define the process per se. Right? When we take a look at a speech, even though we say be authentic, there's a big part of who we are, be genuine. There are a lot of tangibles we need to deal with as well, with regards to body language, with regards to vocal variety, with regards to stage presence. These are tools to enhance your speech. So my question to all of you would be, how do you use these tools? What is your writing process? At what stage do you incorporate what? And based on yourself, how do you decide what gets how much time?
I would love to know from Mike how he did this for the virtual contest, and that may be most useful for folks because it's going to be virtual for some time to come. Mike?
Yeah, I think it begins. With maybe the idea. I've heard. I tend to begin with the story. If there's a story that I like, I had to scrap the speech that I was going to give, and I think the speaks actually, Kaishika, to your point about you don't have to have a tragedy in your life. I mean, the central story in my speech is a kid who tears apart a projector and then gets a little sad whenever, one of the teachers yells at him. Well, doesn't everybody have a story like that? So I completely agree that I don't buy this, that nobody has stories. If we mine those enough, then everybody's got amazing stories. I've never found anybody, if I ask enough questions, they don't have a universal amazing story that I can learn from. And that's a tangent. I won't go down that road. So to answer the question, I kind of find a story that I like, that, to your point, it speaks to me. But then I start asking, why does it speak to me? What did I learn from that? And what are the universal questions? What are the universal there? And so we'll start then writing. I write everything out long form because I like playing with words and phrases. For example, in that final speech, there's a place where I'm speaking to leaders and I like playing with alliteration as well, that a leader has an opportunity to encourage effort for the chance to find the future. And so that phrase, that sentence didn't exist until I sat down and wrote it out and said, what's a more interesting way to say what was there before? But then write it out and then, like, I have a visual around my house, the visual outline that I kind of walk through my house mentally. But then we'll just run it in front of the mirror so that, especially in the virtual environment, all of a sudden you can see if my face goes from to, right? You can't see that well on a big stage. So I did that in front of the mirror and saw, okay, does that try to work? Videoed a lot on Zoom to be able to see if the nuance of it worked. Practiced it a ton, and then the day before, I think, would not let myself do it because I wanted to have a certain amount of tension so that I wasn't feeling like, okay, this is the point where I look at the ceiling. This is the point where I stand over here. I kind of wanted to have a bad dress rehearsal so that in the middle of the moment, the only thing I had to default back on was telling the actual story. So does that help? Does that answer the question you asked?
Beautifully.
Okay.
I think what you're talking about is to depend on mechanics, but don't bet your life on it. Right? You need to have instinct. So you kind of practice the mechanics, but having that edge, being a little nervous, keeps you focused. I mean, that's fantastic. That's something all of us can take. Coming back to the point we were discussing earlier as well. How do we deal with nerves? I think it's good to understand it's good to have a little nerves. And in fact, I was talking to one of my friends once, and they said, "Do you get nervous while speaking?" I said, "The day I don't get nervous is the day I'll quit speaking." Right? I do this because I enjoy speaking, because it gives me those jitters, and I enjoy that whole process. And I think having those nerves are important, and you beautifully said it better than anybody could.
I have a metaphor for this, Pranab, and to sync with what Mike said, I like to see this as a pole vaulting competition. The pole vault in Olympics and other things. So can you jump without the pole? You can't, because you can't gain that height. And the pole is like the speech mechanics, your body language, voice, and your process and your practice. You can't make that cut without the pole. But when it comes to the jump, can you jump with the pole? No, you cannot jump with the pole in your hand. You got to drop it after it gives you that height and momentum, and you're jumping alone. So when the audience, you cannot jump without the pole, but if the audience are seeing the pole and not the experience, then the pole distracts the jump itself. You need the mechanics to elevate your speech. But once you elevate your speech, the audience see an experience. They don't see body language in your speech. They see an experience that it offers. And that metaphor has helped me ask me that question each time. Aditya, does your speech show the pole or does it show the jump? I wanted to show the jump, not the pole.
So the rest of you, I'm curious, whenever you do your speeches, do you have your speeches memorized word for word or no? Yeah, kind of what's your process?
No, I'm actually the right opposite. So Who Do You Think You Are was the first speech that I started off in Toastmasters. I didn't have a written script at club, area, division. By division, I got blasted by my president and my mentor because they asked for the script. They were like, "Where's your script?" And I said, "I don't have a script." I said, "So you're saying the different versions of the speech?" I said, "Yeah. Because there's different audience every time, so I might as well say a little bit." They said, no, we're not going to risk this. You're going to script it. So the problem with me scripting my speeches, I'm Shakespeare on paper. And when I speak, I'm Shakespeare on paper. Like I want to use the most finest language on paper, and I want to perfect it. So it's beautiful if you have the paper in front of you. But if I'm supposed to present it to an audience, it looks so much fake, and it is not my character because people have seen me speak before. So I have this dilemma. What do I do? Do I do a fake Shakespeare in front of people, or do I just speak from my heart? What do I do? So just for the mentor to have a good night's sleep, I wrote him a script and I gave it to him so that he can wake up with the hope that I'm going to present that. But when I went on stage, I just did my own version. Because for me, it was more like, I'm going to take these guys on a journey. And you can't take them on a journey if you have a script with you on where to turn and where to bend. You just have to go with the flow. And sometimes the emotions on your face are not the emotions that you practice in front of a mirror. But if it requires at that particular moment, it might give that little edge of authenticity. And for me, it's very difficult to practice. So I have a different level of respect for people who can write and produce the same thing on stage, because I don't have that talent. For me, it's two different things, and it's very difficult for me.
That's a great answer, and I would like to add to that, right? With what Kaishika said was, you write to be read, you speak to be heard, And one of the ways I realized authenticity was, someone said, I don't know who said it, but I wish I remember this person, but said, the whole journey in Toastmasters about speaking and learning every gesture and every word and everything that you have to do is to get to a stage where you can be truly yourself, on stage and off stage, the exact same person, right? And once you get there, then you don't have to worry about this thing. So when Kaishika, I spent time with Kaishika in Vancouver after I lost semifinals, and I think Kaishika also did not make it to the finals from memory, and we were hanging out, and I realized she's the exact same person that she was on stage. There was nothing different about her. She was as funny, as animated, and everything else, right? And what I realize is, when I joined Toastmasters, I'm going to give an entirely different view, having just said this. When I joined Toastmasters, I had a very different process, and I thank God I had that process. I must have practiced my speech to death. I had written down every single word. I had trimmed it down to 735 words from 880, which was 1,420 at the start. This 6 months of my first Toastmasters journey, when I was from club to district, when I was going in that journey, I practiced so much, and that's what I tell my son, who's learning to be a cricketer, that if you don't learn to play every shot academically, if you don't know how to play a hook shot and a square drive, you won't be able to use your instincts to use those shots when you're facing in the real game, right? So you got to do it when you're starting out. You have to practice to death. You have to know how every gesture works, look at the mirror and everything else, right? And then you get to a stage of doing this where you don't have to write down everything. Where you know when Mike Carr is going to take a stage and do a storytelling, he can be so involved that he won't care which side of the screen he's on. He's just storytelling, right? He's not practicing it to death, but he knows how to use the stage, the screen. And that's what I found when I was doing the conscious choice speech in 2019, and I was doing it in my district. I just could not practice the speech in my club, or any of the clubs, because I could not do any gesture. I could not write it down. I had to speak my heart out. I had to be authentic. So this was one speech where I did not practice at all and just went from contest to contest to contest to contest. And I won district and regionals that year. And you won't believe, if you see my district video, you'll see I'm clasping hands, I'm talking like this, my shoulders are drooping. None of the definitive gestures and body language that you're supposed to have. So I think the point is, yes, absolutely write down, absolutely practice every gesture, rehearse it to death when you're starting out. And then when you realize that you don't have to do all of that, that's when you stop doing it. That's when you be in the moment, be present, and just focus on saying things the way and that way you connect better.
Beautiful. Bharat, just to expand on that, I mean, something that you spoke about is kind of practice when you're not really on stage so that you can use it if you need be. So I was giving one example to one of my friends, and this is an example of a samurai in the garden, right? And he's a person who practices his art every single day. So a person walks up to the samurai and he says, "We are not at war. Why are you practicing your art?" And he says, "I'd much rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war." So the point being, I'd much rather have the skills now than not have them at all. So what you're beautifully saying is kind of practice them, have them in your toolkit, but don't default to them, don't depend on them too much. Kind of have them with you, but depend on yourself as a speech, and they're just there as a backup. And I can't agree more with the audience. I can see the chat blowing up. I mean, this is a wonderful discussion that we're having right now. But I'm talking about just the things that were spoken in this particular question. Mike, you're talking about being a little nervous. Kaishika, you're saying people always focus on practicing speech, and you said you don't really need to know it word by word. You need to feel the speech. And Aditya, beautifully example, right? The pole vault one is such an eye opener with regards to how we need to work with the speech. A small example puts things into perspectives. And Bharat, I mean, that quote is amazing. You speak to be read, but you speak to be heard, but write to be read. I mean, that's beautiful. We kind of confused because we write a speech and then we deliver. There is a fine line between doing both. I can't thank you guys enough. I mean, what you guys are doing, it's fabulous. I want to continue going on this topic of mechanics and processes. I think, Mike, you had once mentioned in your speeches, you said similarity is skill and difference is sell. Right? And when it comes to the world stage, when you start competing, you want to have a differentiating factor. You obviously have this mechanics, you have your speech. So my question to all of you again would be, when you look back at your speech, when you look back at yourself as a person, what do you think is your differentiation factor? What do you think that you do that you are proud of? Apart from staying silent, anybody can take it.
It's easier for me to look at the other three people and say what I like about them than actually think about my differentiation. So when it comes to...
Aditya, I'm sorry to cut you off. Maybe you want to do that as well. Tell us what is it that you like and give us a little bit about the others too.
Well, the first thing I would say, what I love about all the three is whatever they've said now as lessons learned seem to match exactly with my little knowledge and observation of them and about them. So in that sense, I can see authenticity ooze out in this discussion, which is fantastic. I found that in Kaishika, in fact, she may not even remember this, in 2017 World Champs, when she was not even contesting. But I think the previous year, was that 2016 when you contested, Kaishika?
Yes.
Yeah, I think she had got so passionate about the stage that she was in the backstage at the World Championship. I don't even know whether she was allowed, but she just walked right in and was putting out it as at ease. She was not an organizer, nor was she a contestant, but she was just there being herself, saying hi to people and making people relax and wishing them the best. I was like, okay, why was I so rigid the previous year when I was not contesting, sitting in the audience when I could have been of more service to others? So the authenticity I can see in all of them. Now coming to me, when it comes to free-flowing education sessions, keynotes, what I consider one of the things that turns me on and keeps me be my best is spontaneous humor. I can't write a joke, but I consider myself pretty good at spontaneous humor, picking up something in the audience, the zeitgeist of the moment, involving people in the presentation. That can't happen so much in a 5 to 7 minute speech, but that I consider as my strength in a large group, longer session, to really poke fun and be with the audience and sense what's happening at the moment without being bogged down or being preoccupied by a script. So that's my strength.
How about the others?
I'm still thinking because it's a very interesting question, given one of the biggest things I talk about these days whenever I'm asked to speak somewhere or share some knowledge is the biggest thing I say is this entire thing is very easy to do when you realize what kind of a speaker you are, right? Are you a storyteller? Are you a really funny person? Are you a person who can preach? Can you be a priest? Are you a person who can give sermons? The day you know what kind of speaker you really are, your speeches become easier because, that's how you write your content, that's how you speak. And I find what keeps me going in the contest in particular is taking a different challenge every year on what kind of speaker do I want to be, to see, right? In the first year, I wanted to be a creative speaker using 6 props. The second time I wanted to be a motivational speaker like Tony Robbins. And I was doing this speech about, do something with your life. And I was trying to figure that out. Can I be that speaker? The third time I was speaking, it was about, being a social justice kind of a person, right? Person who wants to do something for the society. Then last year I tried to be an absolute entertaining speaker. So I find it really hard to say this is what I'm most proud of. I think I'm probably just proud of the fact that I try something very different without just to see whether I can do it and do it right in the contest without worrying about taking a risk, right? I kind of take a risk with what I have to say and going with it. I think that's probably the thing, right? But I love what Aditya said about you can spot about other people and see, like Aditya, for example, when he does his speeches, they are very, very analytical, very educational, right? You can see he's giving that. But he was the same thing. I mean, I met him in 2019 in Denver, and he crossed me, and he said, "I just heard you on a sound rehearsal, and you said, what's the burning question? It's not question, it's question," right? He was the same guy doing his speeches, the kind of speaker, also being a bit educational. He could not stop himself from coming to me and saying that, right? So I think a lot of that is about mostly focusing on what kind of speaker do you want to be, but also this is what you enjoy doing most. And I think that's where it comes down to. That's where I think it's a very hard question to answer that way. What are you most proud of? You can be proud of achievements, not of your own traits, I suppose.
I mean, that was the whole point of the question, just for us to dig a little deep. But I think you answered it. If you were a superhero, spontaneity would have been your superpower, I guess, because you tried something new every single time. So what about Kaish, Mike? Have you guys ever give it a thought?
So I wouldn't say I'm proud of this, but this is something that a lot of people come up to me and ask how I do, is vocal variety, to be able to speak in different characters. Like I could sound like a kid, I could sound like an old lady. That's probably because I always try and mock people at school, and I really got better at it. And I used it at Toastmasters, and it took me places. So it's not something I'm really proud of, because that's not something my parents would want me to be proud of, because I always mock aunties at church and kids in malls, and that's not something to be proud of, but it actually worked for Toastmasters. So that's one thing. But what I'm honestly proud of is to be able to speak to hearts. And if I've not done it on a Toastmaster stage, I've done it on so many other stages locally, to children from different parts of the country, from all walks of life, to be able to tell them that, you know, if I can do it, you can do it. And for those children to actually go that extra mile and do something for themselves in terms of education or work or something of that sort, or even to come out of a certain situation, to be able to tell them that it's okay, you can now move on and sort of plan your life ahead, to be able to talk to hearts, to be able to sort of open up and communicate with them. I would say that ability, I've been blessed. If I'm not proud, I'm blessed with that ability, and I really hope I grow in that aspect and be helpful to people. So that's something I love, and that's something I'm really happy about.
And we seen glimpses and bits of it right here in this panel discussion. Your ability to connect, I mean, it speaks to volumes right there.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I would answer that to say to anybody who is listening, the differentiator.
Mike?
Yeah.
There's a small distortion in your mic.
Okay. Is it still, if I'll just keep talking, is it still there?
You sound like a Terminator, but yeah.
No.
Yes.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, unmuted to say.
I'll be right back. Well done.
Okay, is that any better?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, for anybody, I would say for anybody who is listening, the differentiator is really when you become uniquely you. And if you look in the mirror and you say, there is nothing that makes me uniquely me or is different from the rest of the world, I would softly, kindly, but firmly, gently say to you, you have not mined that enough. Because I used to work for a United States senator, and he told me one time, this when I was early 20s, and he told me one time, he said, Mike, everyone you will ever meet is superior to you in at least one way. And you can build a great life by figuring out how they're superior to you and learning from them. I didn't believe him early on, but I decided to test that theory, and I have found it is exactly true every time. If I can spend enough time with someone, I can find not only what I can learn from them, but also the uniqueness of who they are. And so anybody who will mine that authenticity, mine their own stories, will find that differentiation. So mine, I just happen to be, whenever anybody who knows me will tell you, when things are bad, oh, they're awful. When things are great, they're better than anything in the world. And so I just tend to go with that and jump around and go, oh, that was a great answer, because I know it's goofy, but that's just kind of who this guy is. You don't have to be that way. We have this great lady, and I need to ask her permission before I keep using her name, but she is in our club. She came and she could barely stand in front of the audience. She can be rather monotone and speak in a very dry level. Well, didn't try to be jumping around and enthusiastic. She is the most funny speaker now after several years in our Toastmaster Club because she works that dry humor, and she'll deliver a punchline in a straight face and slay the audience. She is very different than I am, but in many ways much more effective. So it is that uniqueness that is the differentiator in all of us.
So just based on what all of us are talking here right now, just to put things in perspective, I think a beautiful speech has two parts to it: what you do on stage and what you do off stage. And if you notice, when we spoke with the panelists, when I asked them what is a differentiator, what is something they're proud of, almost every answer they gave was things they do off stage. Because what you do on stage is an effect of what you do off stage. So we need to understand it's not disconnected. You need to be that person off stage so you can carry who you are on the stage and be authentic. And that is beautifully demonstrated in your answers here right now. So thanks a lot for sharing that. So Mike, one very quick question for you. When you were moving to the online platform, did you increase your word count to account for lack of response from the audience? And if so, by what percentage?
Typically, whenever I've gone to semifinals, or the bigger the audience, it takes longer for the laugh to go back and forth. So I speak at about 114 words a minute in a typical speech in front of a larger audience. So I need to target about 800 words in a large audience. I was able to, without the big audience, it was closer to about 1,000 words.
Wow.
Okay. So more, we can create more value with our words. I mean, that is something to bear in mind when you're going virtual, I guess. So while I just asked Mike, this is a question to all three of you, that is Kaish, Aditya, and Bharat. And it's something that, Kaish, you were talking about, your ability to have accents and stuff like that. So my question to all of you is twofold. First is, when you're going from club, area, division, district, like what you're refining in your speech, but most importantly, because it is a contest season, and once you go past district, how do you start looking at voice? I mean, because all of us have a native tongue and English is our second language, I would assume. So when you start speaking to a predominantly English speaking community or an audience, like, do you start working on your accents? Do you start looking at stuff like that, which you can play around with your voice? Is there something that you do?
Right. I can take that. So firstly, to your first part, Pranab, one of the best things I did when I was still living in India is join a club like Mumbai Toastmasters, which had 182 active members. Mumbai Toastmaster competitions would be tougher than the division level for sure each year, but only 2 get selected to go to the area. That club contest, boy, was sometimes more tougher to me than the semifinals of the World Champs, because just of the quality of the club. Now, a lot of members, I find, even some mentees who come to me, often say, let me join that club which has 5 members so that I go to the area fast. Now, what happens is it comes to hurt you later in the end, because now you have an average speech that has won you a division contest, and you stand no chance at the district unless you invent something new now. I knew if I win Mumbai Toastmasters, I'm most probably through to the district. And so there is so much pressure taken off me later, because the first product I need to create for Mumbai Toastmasters always needed to be a district level speech by itself. So my first suggestion is, don't try to go the easy route and say later I'll improve myself, because you've already fixed a speech, and how much ever you improvise that, it may go up 10% or 15%. So if you're starting with a great product, that helps. Now, after you win the district, for me personally, I found in 2014 that some of my jokes fell flat, especially the audience members from other nationalities, other cultures. Something that worked really well in India, say a joke about living with parents or about failing in an exam. I thought I was going to get a hysterical laughter at the world stage, and everybody was staring at me as if it's a point, an inspirational point that I was making. And a point where I was trying to make it a poignant point, profound point, people went laughing. So it kind of throws you on the spot there. So, but later, then I realized the cultural connotation to that can be established, as Mike said. When you try to ask what's that least common denominator which connects with everybody, what's that emotion that connects, which embraces everybody in the audience, and those specific emotions like love or wanting to be a better person or happiness, these are common irrespective of your culture, religion, race, creed. So I learned to connect with some of that to appeal to the international audience.
Okay, perfect. So what about Cash and Bharat? How did you play with your voice? I mean, considering you're from different places of the world and you're speaking to an international audience, how did you do that?
I just wanted to put Aditya's background up there.
You are such a funny dude. I love all those.
How Aditya connects. He doesn't have to do voices when he can do this. That's how I remember some of his early speeches. He makes his total face come alive. And, even though he uses a lot of words in his speeches, but he just brings it alive. And I think that's a very good question. And honestly, when I saw Kaishika's speech, I wish I could do what she does with her voices, as she said. And I have tried, and I do stand-up comedy, and I try that, and I am bad, I'm terrible, I'm miserable. I don't have a chance when it comes to doing accents. I can't even lose my own accent, for goodness sake. I've been out of the country from India from 2001, I think, right? So what I found very quickly was the thing about speeches in particular. You're not focusing on comedy. You're not focusing on these characters that you have to bring in so much that people talk about. You're focusing on giving a speech which has storytelling as a part of it, right? And what I found was it's not so important to make everything come alive so much with your voices and everything. It's important to communicate effectively. And when it comes to communicating effectively, the best piece of advice I got in my first year was people telling me, emphasize what you want to say, enunciate better, say those words clearly. If you focus on those 2 or 3 things, your speaking rate will drop. You won't have to do voices. You can do whatever you want just by speaking clearly, enunciating, emphasizing, and then you can do different characters without having to do voices and whatnot. To be honest with you, the biggest thing I had to work on, I think in the first year was that, and it still pays off. And now I can try different voices. Now I can try accents with that. And thanks, Aditya.
That's awesome.
That was very quick. I mean, I did some preparation, but he just found something quickly. And there's another confession. I still try accents. I still fail. Last year, a few months ago, when the district Humorous, and I had Australian character in there, and there are people from my district. I know David's there, and Sue's there, and Kwong's there. They all were laughing because I could not say a single mate. The Australian mate, I could not say it well. But it was funny because I was trying to do it in an Australian accent. So I would say it's a great part of storytelling if you can do it like Kaishika and like Mike. But you can also do what Aditya does, just do with his face without any voices. And he does characters and he goes both sides and he just becomes a different character by doing that without doing voices. And in my case, I think you can just use accent well enough that people will laugh at it.
Fantastic, Mike. So Kaishika, just before you answer, I just want to tell, once you answer this, we're going to take a few audience questions. So while you give us what you use for voice, maybe you can throw in a tip as well as to how we can make it better. Because I remember you were talking in one of the interviews and you suggested people kind of look at follow news channels because they have neutral accent, they have a slow pace, stuff like that. So maybe if you can expand on that and give one more tip for the audience to take home.
So, like I said, for me, speaking was more of trying to imitate other people. So every time I watch CNN and BBC, the first thing I do is I imitate the person. And I think I did it so early on that it caught up with me. So speaking like a British lady in one of my speeches I sounded like a rare animal on stage. People were like, "You can do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I can." I wasn't perfect, but I was getting there. And so when I did it once in Sri Lanka, there were so many great speakers. This was for 2016, the district contest for humorous speech contest. And initially I thought that would only be the Sri Lankan audience. And then they said, oh no, we're going to have Indian audiences. And I thought, okay, maybe I should change my speech. When did I think of it? When I got on stage. And I changed my speech just to accommodate an Indian accent. And trust me, the Indian audience forgot that I was a Sri Lankan participant. They started clapping. They got so excited. They were like, who is this girl? Like, is she from our club? Does anybody know where she's from? Like, we've never seen her in India. How does she do this? And people got really excited. And that's one way to trick people, because they don't know where you're coming from. And people got so excited, they started clapping, and I think the clap kind of also converted into votes, and I was placed third. And I was super excited. That was the first time I got to district, and I was really excited about it. But then later on, when I sort of started thinking about it, why did people like the accent? Is because people, when they see your structure, if you're a fair-skinned person, they obviously expect you to speak like the CNN, BBC kind of accent. And when you are brown-skinned, they expect you to speak, in an Asian accent. But when you change their expectations unexpectedly, there's this sense of shock, disbelief, and also acceptance at the same time. And this kind of plays tricks in their mind. They're like, do we like this or do we don't like this? Maybe we like it. But by the time they decide that, they've already got themselves engaged in this. And they just go with the flow. So that was one trick, but I've tried to train a couple of people to use accents, and then I realized that it's not as easy as it is for me. It's tough because, certain people, the vocal cords, their palate, the usage is quite rigid than what it is for me. For me, it's probably because I studied in the Sinhalese medium, which is, Sinhala is another language derived from Pali and Sanskrit, and also I speak Tamil, which is also one of the ancient languages in the world. And speaking these languages may have made my, ability to pronounce words differently a lot easily. So for me, when people ask, how do you do the voices? It's not about the voices. Like Bharat said, it's about pronouncing the words correctly. It's about making your audience understand what you're trying to say. And especially when you write your speech, even at a club level, try to write it for a world audience. Because the moment you write it for your club audience, and you try to crack a joke about your president, or try to crack a joke about your vice president, that guy is not going to be there on the world stage with you. Well, it'll be great if he is, but then what if he doesn't? So it's always important to practice to write your speech to the world audience. And by world audience, I don't mean to make it all about, about the U.S. or, about the Canada, about Australia. It's not about that. It's about that one common ground, like Mike said. What is that common thing that people might find funny or connect with? So always try to write your speech for a world audience. So it doesn't matter who your audience is, when it changes, it'll still have a considerable impact on it. Yeah.
Perfect. So thanks
a
about
real quick thing about that. In the reverse, from those who are watching in the United States, increasingly we need, and I'm from a state in Texas where a lot of people think, is there other parts of the world other than Texas? But it is increasingly important. This world is getting smaller, beautifully smaller and smaller and smaller. It is increasingly important for us to not be U.S. centric and to think about what's happening in the world and speak to that as we're writing speeches, for the contest reasons, but also the reason that we're speaking to a broader group of our family around the world, and more we're recognizing we're that. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
That's very well said.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just going to take a couple of quick questions from the audience because we're kind of closing up on the time. So one of the questions we noticed is, how do you add humor to your speech? Now, I would like to throw that up to Bharat and Kaishika because you guys kind of do stand-up comedy. you host shows and stuff like that. So maybe you can add a bit of how to add humor. But before I do that, Bharat, I wanted to talk to you about, you were featured in the newspaper. Like, could you talk about this particular newspaper clipping that we're showing right now?
What?
Yep. Ashish, can you just throw up that newspaper clipping?
You just made something up.
Okay, are we waiting?
Jeez, you got me worried now.
Just a second.
Is it going to be tomorrow's news?
I know I broke down the lockdown rules. Oh, right. Oh, jeez. Right. You're one amazing.
Because like you did so much fun in just your regular post. I mean, so it felt apt to throw this up, especially when we're talking about humor. So please go ahead.
All right, for the audiences like Mike and some of my friends from Australia, what that headline is saying is, man gave someone a contract killing kind of a job. The Supari word means contract killing, and yeah, so that's a. I think in stand-up comedy, right? In stand-up comedy, this is the classic rule where observational comedy is the best comedy. What you observe around you, and if you think it's funny, then it's funny, right? When I saw myself doing this rifle shooting, I thought, what's the next best thing I can do with this now, with this skill, right? I can be a contract killer. It just so happens that that very day when I was taking this picture, the newspaper in front of me was about this contract killing thing. And this was in Bangalore in December last year, I think. So humor is one such thing. You express yourself the way you feel. And if that's funny, if people laugh at you, you know that's your sense of humor. I mean, for example, in my district, people tell me I have a cheeky sense of humor, right? So I allowed that to come through in my speeches, right? I find it hard when I manufacture humor, with the whole rule of three that people do, serious, and funny. That's a very standard thing that we do. It's a very good technique. And it works sometimes, but I have to manufacture that humor. But my natural humor is observational. I look at something, I find it funny, and I just bring it up, right? What my kids say at home to me is very funny. I bring it in my speeches, right? And that clipping is I think it's an example of how my brain works, I suppose. I can connect these two things and think, yep, I can imagine myself. And a tip for the audience is also what Kaishika does, Aditya does, is self-deprecating humor is the best humor, right? You can make fun of yourself, and you will find all of us do that to a great extent. Just try and make fun of yourself.
Mostly it's true, Bharat. That was.
What's that?
In my case, it was self-deprecating humor was just a fact.
Right.
Not humor. Go ahead, sorry.
So Aditya, I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you were doing this when you talk about self-deprecating humor. Something that fascinated me was your journey as well, right? Because you had this photo, which I saw with, I think, Ed Tate, where you were like this young chap with the world champion, just happy to take a picture. And correct me if I'm wrong, is that you in the photo right there?
On the left?
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was Ed Tate in 2011.
You went from being with Ed Tate to being on the world stage. What do you see is the difference here?
We had invited in, I think, Mangalore, which was when we were still one district, I guess, India and Sri Lanka. That was the semi-annual conference called Reverberations. So what difference do I see in Ed Tate or me?
In yourself.
Well, it's the difference really is that along our life, we always consider that we are going in a particular track and achievers or famous people are going on a parallel track. And we realize sometimes it's just a spectacle that we can observe, but we can't enter that arena because those are for people, the famous people, the actors, the cricketers, the superstars, the champs. All we can do is observe that spectacle, but it's for a certain set of people to traverse that journey. As you improve and as you kind of transcend or transfer yourself into that other track, you realize you're still the same person, and there's nothing that's changed about you as a person. And you realize they were the same people when they were in that track. It's you who kept them in a different place in your own mind and heart. So when I started occupying that space, what Ed did, I realized it's not really another track, it's still the same real person. So my transformation has been the fact that I don't idolize anybody. I respect people, I learn from them, but I realize they're as vulnerable as anybody else. They have the same happiness and sadness and dualities of life as anybody else. So it connects me with even achievers. Today, if I see even a great, say, if you look at a very famous sport, you see a Virat Kohli, you kind of see him as a human being because he has the same dualities like anybody else. So at a human level, we all are very similar. And that's what I learned from my own journey of going to that side.
Amazing, amazing.
Unless you're Donald Trump. In that case, you're not similar.
I let Mike answer the question. He's going to vote in a month.
There you go.
What? Oh, I'm going to vote him? Yeah. I could have a lot to say about that and probably should stay away from it. Let's just say I believe in the global family, and maybe you can derive where you think I'm going from there.
Guys, we're kind of hitting the time cap here. I just had a couple of quick questions with regards to something that came up in the audience, especially for Mike. How did you get ready with regards to the online virtual setting? How was it different from being physically there? A couple of quick things that you did with regards to, your prep.
Yeah, I was just, sorry, my glasses reflect all this light in front of me. I was just actually talking to an audience last night about, or 12 hours ago about this, I think the analogy, I don't know if the Karate Kid was an international sensation or if it was just U.S. But there was this scene in it where I think it was the master was saying, you don't punch to the wood, you punch on the opposite side. So you punch through going over here. And there's a actual story I won't tell you because of time that I taught my son that, and then he tried that on my shoulder and I hurt for a week. But the concept is, in terms of the analogy holds for the camera, is having to not speak to this thing right here, but it's seeing, if this is the camera, speaking through the camera to the person on the other side. There were multiple times in that speech getting ready for the virtual environment where I'm visualizing an audience on the opposite side of this camera, maybe about a foot behind. So at the beginning, it is my Austin Toastmaster Club. There's a point where it's my daughter Macy, where I'm telling her the victory is not in the results. The victory is in the try. Because she's had some hardship in her life that she's pressed through. And then there are other people, but speaking not directly to that, but through that camera to the chosen audience on the other side made a ton of difference.
Mike, this is beautiful. I mean, we spoke about this in the lead up to this panel discussion as well. You did mention about speaking through the camera, and we did speak about something called breaking the fourth wall. And this is what I got from watching the movie Deadpool, right? Where you're in a scene, you're talking, and then you break away from the scene, you come back, give a perspective, and then go back to your scene. And I saw you do it a couple of times when you were talking about Norway. You said, I want to go to Norway, and then you break away and say, Norway was a special place, and then you come back. And you also did it with your actions when you're talking about, somebody putting a hand on you. Instead of going three-dimensionally, you were going the fourth dimension, breaking the fourth wall. And this is something we are not really used to in a physical sense. And you brought it up in the virtual sense and kind of executed to the T. So thanks a lot for sharing how you did it. And the idea was pretty simple. Just look through the camera. I mean, like Mr. Miyagi told the Karate Kid, right? Punch through. So it's as simple as that, but it came through for all of us. So thanks a lot for sharing that aspect. While we're ending here, we have a couple of more questions. I think we're pretty much done with regards to how the panel discussion, we're hitting up on time. But something I really want to bring up, I wanted you to expand, but I think I will touch upon myself, is Bharat, I've seen you with your kids. They walked in during this session, they walked in earlier sessions, and they're a big part of your family, and we accept that. And the fact that you embrace it and be a good parent that you are takes us a long way, right? Because I've noticed when you're talking about the immense support you get at the club, a lot of people, when they were filling up these forms, they said, we're there for Bharat. And there was this special person, and she mentioned, I'm so proud of my son, and I'm being there for my son as well. And we noticed that. So it's such an endearing part of us being part of the whole family. And while you do that, you also work at Accenture, and you manage all of these roles. And so with Mike, I mean, you've got 8 kids, Mike. It's insane being a father to manage all these roles and being a financial advisor. So what I'm trying to say is, if any, yeah, there you go. That's your family, right, Mike? Take a look at that. That's amazing. So while we're talking about all of this, I think if anybody ever has an excuse not to give enough time to Toastmasters, it's you guys. You could say, we have family, we've got work, I'm a financial advisor, I'm working in Accenture, I'm got a management consultant. But you given time, because the process is the reward, right? Winning the championship is something, but you've given so much time and effort to all of these things. And that is my biggest takeaway from everything that's happened here today. And I see a lot of people asking questions like, what keeps you going? And, why do you keep coming back to the World Championship stage? How do you break the monotony on Toastmasters? I think what you're doing by leading example, right? By managing family, by having these businesses on the side is something that we all need to learn. Right? It's just a matter of priorities. If you prioritize it, you'll find a way to do it. And as we're closing, I would just like to ask, is there something that I missed out on asking you guys, and maybe you want to chime in?
Mike, tell people what time it is for you there.
Oh, it is now 3:12 a.m.
That's for you, District 92. So thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you guys. This has been well worth. Well, I slept a little while, got up. This has been well worth jumping up for. And coffee. God bless coffee.
You run on caffeine. I've seen your post. You've got like 3 coffee makers or something. I mean, it's crazy.
I'm trying to cut down, but yes, I do run on coffee.
Yeah. So while I close this, I want to give you guys the closing statements. But Mike referred to something about one of his daughters having an issue, and I don't want to expand too much on it. But it is such a beautiful story that when I heard the story about where she's gone from struggling to listen to being able to read lips. Well, she's gone from being an advocate for herself and advocate for people with disabilities. Right? She's able to make something out of herself because of what Mike has spoken, of what all of us have spoken about, controlling things that we can and letting go of things we can't control. But also something that came up there is having a habit of excellence. And Mike did speak about that. So as we close on that beautiful note, I would like to ask each and every one of you, what is a habit that you have or that you would like to pass on to the audience right now that maybe they should inculcate? If not that, who according to you is a good speaker? Right? What it takes to be a good speaker? Anything of that sort? I know it's a loaded question. It's difficult to answer, but however we define it, or anything you want to close, just close it and we will hand it over. Just before you guys know, all of your social media links have been put in the chat, but to all the audience, you will be getting an email again with the social media links and their bios. So please do connect with them on social media. I'm pretty sure we had a lot of questions here because we're digging deep. We couldn't go wide. So if you have questions, go to their social media and ask them all these questions, and maybe we can touch upon them and they can answer them personally as well. But I hand it over to you guys.
And can I ask, as you go around, I want to follow y'all's wisdom, my fellow panelists. So do you mind telling me how I follow you as you go? What the best place is?
Shweta, can you just share the social media links on the chat, and Mike will send it to you guys as well.
Oh, cool.
We kind of put up everybody's social media links, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, website, everything on chat.
I think This just made my
Yeah.
day. A world champion's asking me, how does he follow me? Wow. Mike,
I know, right? I know.
phenomenal.
You're a good dude, man.
I think we will be following you, Mike, and your journey and what you do next, because that's the most important thing, right? When people want to know where's everyone headed. I had someone ask me this question 2 days ago. Where are you headed with all this? Why are you doing this year after year? And we definitely want to see where you take this, Mike, given what just Pranab just said about you, family man, and everything. As my closing thoughts, and a lot of thoughts coming to mind, and thank you for such kind words, Pranav, and everyone else who said those things. It's just beautiful. It's heart touching. And I think one of the things that I really want to emphasize is speeches come from a place of heart, like everyone has said, and let it be that way. It's obviously good to win. I also mentioned when you go on this contest journey in particular, if you're here for tips on contest, there will be heartbreaks. It's not a journey. It's a roller coaster. It's just not a journey with multiple stops. It's up and down. You're winning one day and losing next day. So don't get on this contest thing because of this whole winning thing, because then your speeches will reflect that. Go on this journey from an absolute place of love, and that place of love then will come from family, will come from a place of serving people, giving back. All of this comes down to that. How much do you give back? And on the second point about this time management kind of a thing, it's a very, very important thing to agree. This whole cliche about, do what you love is actually true, is absolutely true. If you do what you love, you will make time for this. It's not about the time anymore. It's just about the energy. You just manage your energy throughout your day you have 8 kids like Mike Carr, or you're newly married like Kaishika, or you have no kids like Aditya, but is absolutely busy doing lots of things. We just have to manage our energy, but you definitely have to find something you love. And in speaking, it has to be about the kind of speaking you love. And you will find a reason, and it won't be a monotonous Toastmasters speeches journey. Thank you. But thank you so much again.
Thank you, Bharat. Aditya, Kaish, Mike, anything to close?
Sure.
So I'll take it from Bharat. Pranab, Shweta, and the entire team who put this together, thank you so much. The love that's outpouring on the chat boxes, on all of these social media links. I'm just getting in so many follows and so many people commenting on Messenger and all of that. It's just lovely to know all of you, and let me know how I can help you in any which way possible. And we will, as a team, we will help you out in which way possible. There was one thing that I always told myself when I came to Toastmasters. When people saw me do speeches and they saw that I was doing well, there was one person who came up to me and said, why don't you make this your way of earning, make money out of it? That's when it hit me that if you make your passion pay your bills, you might lose the passion in it because you are going for a slightly bigger task with that. So I told myself I won't do it for money, because all of us here today, we're doing it because we have a message to share, and we are all doing this because we love to share our stories, and we are all doing this because we love to connect with people and bring a change to the world we live in. So let's keep it like that. Let's make sure that the stories and the experiences that we share are coming from an absolute place of love, just like Bharat said. And let's keep it pure and let's keep it full of fun. But let it not be always about the awards, the trophies, the titles, because it's good if it comes your way, but just don't make it all about it. And thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Mike, for your presence and your wonderful family picture. That is beautiful. I just love your family picture. It's right out of a fairy tale, and I love it. And Bharat, it's good to see you again. Lovely to hear you once again, and you've not changed a bit. And Aditya, Guru, thank you so much for sharing and sharing this panel with us. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge as well. And guys, really, really happy to be here, and good luck with you guys.
I would just echo the two speakers. Thank you all for inviting. Being a professional speaker, management consultant, understanding people and audiences become important for me, both as a passion and as a professional need. So I remember, apart from going into the ancient wisdom, as Pranab said, of Vedanta and stuff, I've also got myself certified in brain science, which is neuroscience. And one of the things it talks about habits, Pranab, because you spoke about what habits can we inculcate as an audience of 160. One of the habits that neuroscience talks about is understanding how habits is formed, which is the more you reinforce something, there is a stronger neural network created in your own brain of bringing that to the forefront when the world throws a stimulus. And Hebb's law says neurons that are wired together always fire together. So if you look at a stage and the first thought you get is fright, you're strengthening that neural network. And the more you see a stage, the more fright would be triggered. But it's also true that you don't need to go back and unwind neural networks to create new ones. All you need to do is reinforce the right ones, and the strength of the old ones automatically get loosened. So reinforce who you want to be, rather than trying to go back and correcting everything that you think you're not, which was a great insight that I got from my neuroscience certification. You don't need to go back and cure a problem or a fear that you have. All you need to do is reinforce who you want to be, and automatically the previous network get loosened and the new network gets tightened and strengthened. And that the neurons that are wired together fire together. Thank you, Pranab. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Mike, Kaishika, and Bharat. It was a pleasure spending this morning with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've had the benefit of thinking about this while my fellow panelists were talking. I would say to you who are watching this, you absolutely have to believe that you have magic in you that this world needs to see. You have a uniqueness in you that is the pathway to the beautiful life that you're looking forward to. There was somebody in the Q&A that was asking about, has there ever been a time of just kind of devastation in your life, and how did you keep going? And I was actually writing in my most recent newsletter, writing about this in 2008. That was it for me. There was devastation professionally, personally, I mean, every way you can imagine. And you don't have to, I love what Kaishika said about it's not about the, keeping about the trophy, about continuing forward. If we're climbing toward a mountaintop, if we just keep our eye on the mountaintop, we're going to walk off the edge of a cliff. There are times in our lives where we can't imagine standing on the top of a mountain, but we can take the next two steps. We can go to the top of the next switchback and keep moving up the mountain. And I would just say to you, if you're wanting to advance in a contest, or you're wanting to be a better speaker, or just be a better human, and you don't see the vision, that's okay. You can just keep going. I write more about that at MikeCarrOfficial.com, and it's a free newsletter. If you want that, I'll send that to you about that particular thing. But that's what I would say is, you don't have to even believe in yourself to continue moving forward. It's just the next small steps will get you there, and you will begin to see that magic in you as it seeps through your pores into the world, and others tell you thank you for sharing that.
Beautiful. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm just going to keep it quick. I mean, my biggest takeaway from this whole session was two things. One, the amount of knowledge that you guys have. I honestly believe we've not even scratched the surface of what we can learn from each and every one of you, just because of how deep we were going in the topics. And the second thing is, a lot of us focus on the mechanics, on what needs to be done. How do I present myself on stage? What do I need to say, instead of focusing on becoming better? So like I always say, work on being, don't work on being a better Toastmaster, Pranab. Work on being a better Pranab who's also a Toastmaster, right? And through the process, you become better as a world champion, as a speaker, and affect lives of work, family, and everything. It just flows. So thanks a lot for everything. The saddest part about this panel discussion is that it's coming to an end, but all good things come to an end only for great things to begin. And the greatest thing for any and each and every one of us is for the audience to please go and connect with each and every one of these panelists online. They say you're the sum of the people you surround yourself with. So surround yourself with people like this, connect with them online, ask them questions, put them in a network, be better, because that is the whole intent of this panel discussion. Thanks a lot, Mike. Thank you, Aditya, Bharat, Kaishika. This wouldn't have been possible without